The black ship hung in the void like a forgotten relic, its immense hull cloaked in shadows that seemed to drink in the faint starlight around it. The crew of the Solace had been drifting for weeks, scanning the emptiness for anything of interest, when the ghostly signal first appeared, a faint, irregular pulse, almost like a heartbeat. At first, they dismissed it as a glitch, a flicker in the vast ocean of cosmic noise. But the signal persisted, growing stronger as they followed it, leading them to this silent behemoth adrift in the vast unknown. No one spoke as the Solace approached the black ship. The vessel seemed ancient, its surface marred by scars of time and battles fought long before humans had even dreamed of venturing beyond their own star system. And yet, it was intact, unyielding, as if it defied the very concept of decay. The ship's design was alien, unlike anything recorded in human exploration logs, yet there was something disturbingly familiar about it, an unsettling blend of curves and sharp edges that seemed to echo human ingenuity. "Is it dead?" one of the crew asked, breaking the tense silence. Their voice trembled, as though speaking aloud might awaken whatever slumbered within the massive ship. "No life signs," the captain replied, their tone carefully measured. "No energy readings either. Just the signal." The signal. It pulsed now with eerie precision, a rhythm that seemed to match the pounding of their hearts. It came from deep within the ship, calling to them like a whisper in a dream. The captain's gaze lingered on the viewfinder, their jaw tight. They had seen their fair share of derelict ships, graveyards of the cosmos left behind by careless explorers or civilizations long extinguished. But this one was different. This one felt alive. A decision had to be made. They couldn't simply leave. Not when they were so close to unraveling whatever secret the black ship held. A boarding party was assembled, a small team of engineers and explorers who volunteered, or perhaps were too curious to refuse. The team suited up in silence, their faces a mix of determination and unease. The boarding craft hummed softly as it detached from the Solace and drifted toward the black ship. Inside, the team checked their equipment and exchanged quiet glances. The air was heavy with anticipation. One of them whispered a nervous joke, but it fell flat, the weight of the moment too much for levity. The craft latched onto an airlock, its mechanical arms grasping at the dark surface of the alien hull. The team's leader, a seasoned explorer with sharp eyes that missed nothing, took a deep breath before punching the override sequence. The airlock hissed open with a metallic groan, revealing a passageway that stretched into an abyss of shadows. They stepped inside, their boots echoing against the floor, if it could be called a floor. The material was like nothing they had seen before, a metallic alloy that shimmered faintly under the beam of their lights. It felt both impossibly solid and unnervingly organic, as though the ship itself was watching them. The corridors were a labyrinth, twisting and turning without logic or reason. Walls rose at odd angles, and surfaces were adorned with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different perspectives. The air was thin, stale, and carried an almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. "Stay close," the leader said, their voice cutting through the oppressive silence. As they ventured deeper, the team began to notice things, remnants of technology scattered along the corridors, half buried in the alien alloy. Some of it was clearly alien, with shapes and symbols that defied understanding. But some of it wasn't. A fragment of a control panel bore what looked like Earth standard interface markings, its design eerily similar to those used by early human spacefarers. A severed cable snaking along the floor was unmistakably wrapped in the familiar black and yellow insulation tape used in human engineering. "What the hell is this?" one of the team muttered, picking up a twisted piece of metal that seemed to fuse human craftsmanship with something far more advanced. "No clue," the leader said, their voice tight. "Document everything. Don't touch anything you don't have to." Their unease grew with every step. It was as though the ship had been cobbled together by two separate minds, one human, the other alien, working in unison, or perhaps at odds. The deeper they went, the more the human elements began to outweigh the alien, until the corridors themselves seemed to shift into something that could almost be described as familiar. Then they found the first body. It was slumped against the wall, its suit torn open at the chest. The insignia on the shoulder was unmistakable, Earth Space Agency. The crew froze, staring at the corpse in stunned silence. It was impossible. No human vessel had reported contact with an alien ship like this, let alone left survivors or casualties. "How long has this been here?" one of them whispered. "Too long," another replied, their voice barely audible. The team's leader crouched beside the body, inspecting it carefully. The suit was old, decades, maybe even centuries out of date. The nameplate was too corroded to read, but the design was unmistakably human. "This doesn't make any sense," the leader said, standing abruptly. "This ship shouldn't even exist. Not like this." The signal grew louder, the pulsing rhythm quickening as though responding to their presence. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once, pulling them deeper into the ship. The team pressed on, their footsteps hesitant but determined. They came to a large chamber, its walls lined with what looked like stasis pods. Most were dark, their contents obscured or empty. But a few glowed faintly, their glass panels fogged over. One of the team moved closer, wiping a gloved hand across the glass. Inside was a figure, humanoid in shape but unmistakably alien. Its skin was a deep, iridescent black, like the void of space itself, and its features were angular, almost sharp. Yet there was something about it that seemed familiar. The signal was deafening now, a cacophony of pulses that made their teeth ache. The figure in the pod twitched, its head snapping toward them as though it could sense their presence. "Back away!" the leader shouted, but it was too late. The ship groaned, its walls vibrating as though it were coming alive. Lights flickered and dim corridors were suddenly bathed in an eerie blue glow. The pods hissed, their seals breaking one by one. Then the figure inside opened its eyes. And they weren't alien. They were human. The moment those eyes opened, every instinct screamed to run. They were unmistakably human, brown with flecks of green, reflecting the dim blue light of the chamber. But there was something about them that felt wrong. Too intense, too knowing. Like they had seen far more than they ever should have. No one moved. The team stood frozen, their breath hitching in unison. The figure inside the pod remained still, its gaze sweeping over them as though it were assessing, calculating. The glass hissed again, fogging briefly before sliding open with an unsettling slowness. A cold mist spilled out, curling around their boots like ghostly tendrils. "Don't move," the leader ordered, their voice trembling despite the command. One hand hovered over their sidearm, though they knew instinctively it would be useless. Whatever this was, it wasn't something they were equipped to handle. The figure shifted, its movements almost mechanical as it stepped out of the pod. Its body, though humanoid, was elongated, its limbs slightly too long, its skin reflecting the faint light like polished onyx. And yet, it wore a suit. Not quite like their sleeker, more advanced, but undeniably human in design. The blend of familiarity and alienness was dizzying, like looking at a distorted reflection of their own species. "Can it speak?" one of the team whispered, barely audible. The figure's head snapped toward the voice, and they recoiled as if struck. It tilted its head, its expression unreadable, before taking a slow step forward. The team's leader raised a hand, signaling for everyone to stay still, but their voice faltered as they tried to address the being. "Who are you?" they asked, their words hesitant, each syllable weighed with caution. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised one hand, long, elegant fingers splayed open and pointed at the body slumped in the corner. The one wearing the Earth Space Agency suit. "What does it mean?" another team member whispered, their voice trembling. "Quiet," the leader snapped, but their eyes never left the figure. It turned back to them, lowering its hand slowly. Then, in a voice that was too human yet carried an eerie resonance, it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The word sent a shiver down their spines. The tone was calm, almost gentle, but there was an edge to it, a warning, a certainty. Before anyone could respond, the ship groaned again, louder this time. The vibrations rippled through the floor, and the blue light overhead began to strobe erratically. What's happening? Someone shouted, their voice rising in panic. The figure's head tilted again, its gaze locking onto the leader. It's waking up. What's waking up? The leader demanded, stepping forward despite their fear. What is this ship? Who are you? Before the figure could answer, a deafening screech tore through the chamber, like metal grinding against metal. The walls shifted, scenes appearing where there had been none before, and the floor beneath them rippled as though alive. The pods lining the walls began to glow brighter, and one by one, more figures started to stir within them. Get back to the ship! The leader barked, their voice cutting through the chaos. Now! The team scrambled, their boots clattering against the shifting floor as they turned and ran for the corridor. But the way back was no longer the same. The labyrinth had changed, its passages twisting and folding into new configurations. What had been a straight path was now a dead end. What had been a corridor now led into a vast, dark void. It's closing us in! Someone yelled, panic creeping into their voice. Stay together! The leader ordered, though their own fear was evident. They glanced back, half expecting to see the figure following them, but it hadn't moved. It stood in the center of the chamber, watching them with those unnervingly human eyes. You can't escape it, the figure called after them, its voice carrying effortlessly over the rising noise. It's part of you now. The words made no sense, but there was no time to dwell on them. The team pressed forward, their light slicing through the darkness as they searched desperately for a way out. The ship seemed to pulse around them, the walls throbbing like a living organism. This isn't a ship, one of them gasped, their voice barely audible over the din. It's alive. Keep moving. The leader snapped, dragging them forward. They turned a corner and stumbled into another chamber, smaller than the first, but just as unsettling. The walls were lined with consoles, alien and human designs fused together in grotesque harmony. Screens flickered with streams of incomprehensible data, and holographic projections floated in the air, displaying symbols and images that seemed to shift and writhe when looked at directly. Is this the source of the signal? Someone asked, their voice filled with a mix of awe and dread. Looks like it, the leader said, their eyes scanning the room. But we don't have time to figure it out. We need to. Their words were cut off as the ship groaned again, the sound more intense this time, almost like a roar. The projections flared brightly, and for a moment, the images on them coalesced into something horrifyingly clear: faces. Human faces. Dozens of them, their expressions frozen in terror, mouths open in silent screams. What the hell is this? One of the team whispered, their voice trembling. The leader stepped closer to one of the projections, their face pale. These are crew logs. Earth Space Agency crew logs. That's impossible, another said, shaking their head. There's no record of any ESA mission encountering something like this. This can't be real. But it was real. The log scrolled past, showing names, ranks, and dates that stretched back decades far beyond the official timeline of human space exploration. And then there was the last entry, the name flickering and distorted but unmistakably human. What's it doing here? The leader murmured, their voice hollow. How did it get here? Before anyone could answer, the floor beneath them shifted violently, throwing them off balance. The walls began to close in, the room shrinking as the ship seemed to twist and writhe around them. We're being pulled deeper. One of them shouted, their voice rising in panic. It's not letting us leave. The leader grabbed their arm, pulling them to their feet. We're not done yet. Stay together, no matter what. But as they turned to find an exit, the chamber went dark. The projections vanished, and the only light came from their flickering headlamps. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by the faint sound of breathing. And then, from somewhere in the distance, they heard it, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down their spines. It was neither human nor mechanical, but something in between, a noise that seemed to come from the very heart of the ship. The leader raised their weapon, their hands shaking. Whatever happens, don't stop moving. We have to find a way out of here. But as they took their first step, a voice echoed through the darkness, deep, resonant, and unmistakably human. You're too late. The voice froze them where they stood. It was unmistakably human, but it carried a weight, an echo, that felt inhuman, ancient and layered, as if countless voices were speaking in unison. The leader turned slowly, their beam of light cutting through the oppressive darkness. The source of the voice was nowhere to be seen. Who's there? The leader demanded, their voice shaking but steady enough to cut through the silence. What do you want? The answer came not from a single direction but from everywhere at once, surrounding them. This was never about what I want. It's about what you've already done. A faint glow ignited down the corridor behind them, a cold, white light that pulsed like the signal they had been chasing. The team hesitated, torn between the promise of illumination and the deep sense of unease the light carried. Against their better judgment, they followed it, their footsteps hesitant and deliberate. The ship's wall shifted subtly, guiding them forward like a predator herding its prey. The corridor opened into a vast chamber unlike anything they'd encountered before. The ceiling was high and domed, and the walls were alive with moving patterns that shifted like liquid metal. At the center of the room stood a towering obelisk, blacker than the void outside, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own eerie rhythm. Around its base lay fragments of human machinery, control panels, tools, even a broken spacesuit, all fused with alien alloys as if consumed by the ship itself. Standing in front of the obelisk was the figure from the stasis pod, its elongated form silhouetted against the pulsing glow. It turned slowly, its movement smooth and deliberate, and those human eyes bore into them once again. You've been here before, it said, its voice calm but accusatory. All of you. You just don't remember. That's impossible, the leader said, their voice cracking under the strain. We've never seen this ship before. You haven't, the figure interrupted, taking a step closer. Not in this life. The words hung in the air, heavy and incomprehensible. The team exchanged glances, their confusion mirrored on each other's faces. The leader shook their head, refusing to accept the implications. What are you talking about? The figure raised a hand, pointing toward the obelisk. It's all here. Everything. Your past, your present, your future. The ship remembers because it is you. It's always been you. The obelisk pulsed, and the patterns on its surface shifted, revealing fragmented images. Faces flickered, human faces, some familiar, some not. There were scenes of people building, exploring, fighting. The fragments coalesced into an image of Earth, but not the Earth they knew. This Earth was scarred, its surface blackened and cracked, its cities in ruins. The vision dissolved into chaos, ships fleeing into the void, a desperate exodus into the unknown. One of the team gasped, stumbling back. That's Earth, but how? How could it be? It's not the Earth you left, the figure said, stepping closer. It's the Earth you'll create. The leader's hands tightened into fists. No. That doesn't make any sense. This ship is ancient. How could it? Time doesn't flow here, the figure said, its voice heavy with meaning. It collapses. Everything you've done, everything you will do, it all converges here. That's why you were drawn to the signal. It's not a warning. It's a summons. The obelisk flared again, brighter this time, and the walls of the chamber shifted. Faces appeared in the liquid patterns, faces they recognized. It was them. Every member of the team, their images etched into the walls like a permanent record. The leader took a step back, their breath catching in their throat. This can't be real. This has to be some kind of trick. The figure tilted its head, those piercing eyes narrowing. It's not a trick. It's a cycle. You've been here before. And every time, you make the same choice. What choice? The leader demanded, their voice rising. What are you talking about? The figure gestured toward the obelisk. This ship is not a vessel. It's a seed. It carries the remnants of a civilization far older than yours, a civilization that destroyed itself trying to outlive its time. It needs a new host. And every time you come here, you bring it what it needs. No, one of the team whispered, shaking their head. We're not part of this. We're just explorers. We didn't know. But you do now, the figure said, its tone cold and final. And knowing changes nothing. The chamber shook violently, the patterns on the walls flaring with light. The obelisk pulsed faster, and the fragments of machinery around it began to fuse, forming something new, a grotesque amalgamation of human and alien technology. The ship roared to life, its walls closing in, its corridors shifting to trap them further. The leader raised their weapon, aiming it at the obelisk. If this is some kind of machine, we can destroy it. The figure didn't move. You can try. You always do. But the cycle will continue. You've already made your choice. The leader fired, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The beam struck the obelisk, and for a moment, it seemed to falter. The patterns on its surface flickered, and the chamber's light dimmed. But then the ship roared again, louder this time, and the obelisk absorbed the energy, its surface glowing brighter than ever. The figure stepped forward, its eyes locked on the leader. You think you're here by accident. You think you're explorers, pioneers. But the truth is simpler than that. The leader stumbled back, their weapon shaking in their hands. What truth? The figure's gaze was unrelenting. You're the seed. You've always been the seed. The obelisk pulsed one final time, and the chamber was consumed by light. The team screamed as the patterns on the wall surged toward them, wrapping around their bodies like living vines. The leader reached out, trying to grab the nearest teammate, but their hands passed through nothing but light. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The chamber was empty. Silent. The obelisk stood alone, its surface dark and inert. The ship's corridors were still, their twisting patterns frozen in place. The team was gone. Far away, on the bridge of the Solace, an alarm blared. The ship's scanners flickered, and the captain turned toward the display. A single word appeared on the screen, repeated over and over again. Signal received. And deep within the void, the black ship stirred. The black ship drifted silently in the void, a shadow against the backdrop of countless stars. Its exterior, as lifeless and cold as ever, betrayed nothing of the chaos that had unfolded within. Yet, something had changed. Deep inside, the obelisk's glow faded to nothing, leaving the chamber in an oppressive silence, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Back aboard the Solace, the bridge remained frozen in tense confusion. The captain stared at the repeating message on the screen, the word signal received glaring like an accusation. The crew worked frantically, trying to re-establish communication with the boarding party. Every attempt was met with static, an empty void where their voices should have been. Any signs of life? The captain demanded, their tone sharp but laced with a growing fear. The science officer shook their head, adjusting the scanners again. Nothing. Not even residual biosignatures. It's like they've been erased. The captain gritted their teeth, a deep unease settling in their chest. They couldn't shake the feeling that the black ship was watching them, waiting. Bring us back, the captain ordered. We're leaving orbit now. The engines of the Solace roared to life, the ship slowly pulling away from the dark behemoth. But just as they began to break free of its gravity, the black ship responded. Lights rippled across its surface, faint but unmistakable, as though it were waking up. On the bridge, alarms blared. It's powering up, shouted the tactical officer. Energy readings are spiking off the charts. The captain's mind raced, 1,000 scenarios playing out, none of them good. Full thrust, they commanded. Get us as far from that thing as possible. As the Solace accelerated, the black ship remained still, its ominous presence unchanged. But then, the space around it shimmered, a distortion rippling outward like a stone dropped into water. The crew watched in stunned silence as the ship seemed to fold in on itself, vanishing into a pinprick of light before disappearing entirely. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the Solace's engines and the heavy breathing of its crew. Then the tactical officer broke the silence. "It's gone." The captain leaned forward, their eyes locked on the empty void where the black ship had been. "No," they said softly, a chill running down their spine. "It's not gone. It's somewhere else." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the captain's words settling over them. There were no cheers, no relief, only a lingering dread that refused to be shaken. In the following days, the Solace continued its journey, its crew haunted by the events near the black ship. Reports were written, logs were filed, but no one could agree on what had truly happened. The obelisk, the figure, the ship's cryptic messages, it all felt like a nightmare, something too vast and incomprehensible to grasp fully. Back at headquarters, the data gathered from the encounter was analyzed endlessly. Scientists debated the nature of the black ship, some claiming it was a relic of an ancient civilization, others suggesting it was a living entity. But one unsettling conclusion kept resurfacing: the ship wasn't just observing. It was choosing. Months later, the black ship reappeared, this time near a different system, its signal drawing another vessel like a moth to a flame. The crew of the Solace could only watch from afar as the pattern repeated: another boarding party, another disappearance, another ghost story to add to the growing legend of the black ship. The captain, now retired and far from the reaches of deep space, often sat alone, staring up at the night sky. They couldn't forget the words of the figure, the implication that they were part of a cycle that couldn't be broken. The black ship had left its mark, not just on them, but on humanity as a whole. One evening, as they sat on their porch under a canopy of stars, their communicator buzzed. It was a colleague, someone they hadn't spoken to in years. "Have you seen the latest reports?" the voice asked, tense and hurried. "No," the captain replied, their heart sinking. "What is it?" "It's back," the voice said. "The signal. It's broadcasting across multiple systems now. They think it's looking for something or someone." The line went dead, leaving the captain in stunned silence. They looked up at the sky again, the stars now feeling less like points of light and more like eyes staring back. Somewhere out there, the black ship waited. It was patient, methodical, and unyielding. And though humanity tried to avoid its pull, it was only a matter of time before another ship answered the call. The captain stood, their gaze unwavering as they whispered to the night, "It's not the ship we should fear. It's what it finds in us." Far away, in the cold depths of space, the black ship drifted once more, its obelisk pulsing faintly with light. A new signal began to echo across the stars, and the cycle began again. But this time, the ship carried with it something it had never taken before: fragments of those it had chosen, their essence woven into its very core. The ship was no longer just a relic. It was evolving, and the story it carried was no longer one of endings. It was the beginning of something new, something neither fully human nor alien. And as it traveled through the void, silent and unseen, it whispered to itself, a voice that was now many voices: "We are the seed. And we are growing."